Welcome to our newest episode about Vikings. Subscribe our channel and enjoy. The Vikings, also known as the Norse, were a group of people from Scandinavia who lived during the Viking Age, c. 800–1100 CE. They were famous for their seafaring skills, shipbuilding techniques, and their raids on neighboring lands. The Vikings have a rich and fascinating history, which includes their daily life, battles, opponents, kings, weapons, clothes, historical events, and archaeological finds. The Vikings were skilled farmers, fishermen, and traders who lived in small villages or farms throughout Scandinavia. They lived in longhouses made of wood and thatch, with a central hearth for cooking and warmth. The longhouses were often shared by several families, with each family having its own area for sleeping and storage. The Vikings were also skilled craftsmen, making weapons, jewelry, and other household items from wood, metal, and bone. They were skilled weavers and made their own clothes from wool and linen. The women were responsible for spinning and weaving the wool into clothing, while the men were responsible for the hunting and fishing. The Vikings were famous for their shipbuilding techniques, which allowed them to travel long distances and make successful raids on neighboring lands. They built two types of ships, the longship and the nar. The longship was used for raiding and warfare, while the nar was used for trading and transport. The longship was a sleek and narrow vessel that could be rowed or sailed, with a shallow draft that allowed it to navigate shallow waters. It had a single mast with a square sail and could be fitted with up to 60 oars. The nar was a broader and deeper vessel that was used for transporting cargo and goods. It had a more rounded hull and was propelled by a single square sail. The Vikings were famous for their raids on neighboring lands, which were carried out to plunder goods and capture slaves. They targeted areas that were wealthy and had little military defense, such as monasteries and coastal towns. The Vikings were also known for their fierce and brutal fighting skills, which included the use of axes, swords, and spears. The Vikings faced many opponents during their raids, including the Anglo-Saxons, the Franks, and the Celts. They also faced opposition from other Vikings, as different groups vied for power and control over territories. The Vikings were not always successful in their raids, and they suffered defeats at the hands of their opponents. The Vikings were ruled by kings and chieftains, who were often elected by their followers. The kings were responsible for leading their people in battle, settling disputes, and making laws. The Viking kings were often wealthy and powerful, with large retinues of warriors and followers. One of the most famous Viking kings was Ragnar Lothbrok, who was said to have raided England and France in the 9th century. He was also a legendary figure in Viking mythology, and his exploits were celebrated in sagas and poems. Other famous Viking kings included Harald Hardrada, who invaded England in 1066, and Sweyn Forkbeard, who conquered England in the 11th century. The Vikings were known for their skilled use of weapons and armor, which were essential for their raids and battles. They used a variety of weapons, including swords, axes, spears, and bows. The Vikings also used shields to protect themselves in battle. The Viking swords were made from high-quality iron and were renowned for their strength and durability. The Viking axes were also made from high-quality iron and were used for both chopping and throwing. The Viking spears were used for thrusting and had a sharp tip for piercing armor. The bows were used for long-range attacks, and the Vikings were skilled archers. The Vikings also used armor to protect themselves in battle. They wore chainmail shirts, helmets, and shields made from wood or animal hides. The shields were often decorated with intricate designs, and some were even made with metal bosses for added protection. The Viking Age was a period of significant historical events, including the raiding and conquest of neighboring lands. The Vikings were also involved in the establishment of settlements and trade routes, such as the Norse settlements in Greenland and Iceland. One of the most famous Viking historical events was the invasion of England by the Great Heathen Army in the 9th century. The Vikings, led by the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok, conquered large portions of England and established the Danelaw. The Vikings also established settlements in Normandy, France, and Russia. Archaeological finds have provided valuable insights into the daily life and culture of the Vikings. Archaeologists have excavated Viking settlements, burial sites, and shipwrecks, which have revealed information about their farming techniques, social structure, and seafaring skills. One of the most famous Viking archaeological finds is the Oseberg ship, which was discovered in Norway in 1904. The Oseberg ship was a burial ship, which contained the remains of 2 women and a wealth of artifacts, including a Viking cart and intricately carved wooden objects. The Vikings practiced a polytheistic religion, worshipping a pantheon of gods and goddesses. The most prominent gods were Odin, Thor, and Freya. Odin was considered the god of war and death, as well as wisdom and poetry. Thor was the god of thunder and strength, and Freya was the goddess of love, fertility, and war. The Vikings believed that the gods could influence their daily lives and provided offerings and sacrifices to gain their favor. The Vikings had unique burial customs that varied depending on social status and religious beliefs. Wealthy individuals were often buried with valuable objects and weapons, while slaves and servants were buried in simpler graves. Some Vikings were cremated, while others were buried in boats or ships, such as the famous Oseberg ship. The Vikings also believed in an afterlife, and their burial customs were designed to prepare them for it. The belief in Valhalla, a grand hall where warriors who died in battle went, was an essential aspect of Viking religion. The Vikings believed that dying in battle would allow them to enter Valhalla and continue fighting in the service of the gods. The Vikings were skilled artists and craftsmen, producing intricate works of art and objects for daily use. Viking art was often characterized by intricate patterns and designs, such as the famous Viking knotwork. They used a range of materials, including wood, bone, metal, and textiles, to create objects such as jewelry, tools, and weapons. One of the most famous examples of Viking art is the Lewis chessman, a collection of intricately carved chess pieces that date back to the 12th century. The Vikings also created objects such as brooches, buckles, and arm rings, which were often highly decorative and made from precious metals such as silver and gold. The Vikings were skilled navigators and traders, traveling across the seas to establish trade routes and settlements. The Vikings established settlements in Iceland, Greenland, and Newfoundland, and traded with people as far away as the Byzantine Empire. The Vikings also engaged in exploration, with Vikings such as Leif Erikson believed to have reached North America around 1000 CE, several centuries before Columbus. Viking ships were ideal for exploration, as they were lightweight and easy to maneuver, making them perfect for exploring unknown waters. The legacy of the Vikings is still evident in modern times, with their language, culture, and mythology continuing to influence popular culture. The word Viking is still used today to describe a fierce and fearless warrior, and Viking themes continue to be popular in films, television shows, and literature. In Scandinavia, the Viking Age is celebrated as an important part of national history, with many museums and attractions dedicated to preserving Viking culture and history. The Viking heritage is also celebrated in other parts of the world, with events such as Viking festivals and reenactments taking place in countries such as the United States and the United Kingdom. In conclusion, the Vikings were a fascinating and complex group of people with a rich and intriguing history. Their daily life included farming, fishing, and craftsmanship, while their shipbuilding techniques allowed them to travel long distances and make successful raids on neighboring lands. The Vikings faced many opponents during their raids, and their battles were fierce and brutal. The Vikings were ruled by kings and chieftains, who were responsible for leading their people in battle and making laws. The Vikings were also known for their skilled use of weapons and armor, and their historical events and archaeological finds continue to provide valuable insights into their culture and way of life. Thank you for watching. Subscribe our channel and see you in next episodes.